Hey everybody, it's Angelo with a tutorial on editing your photos using Lightroom 6 and the Nik Software suite. What I want to show you is a relatively basic edit using uh, Lightroom, how I get from Lightroom over to the Nik suite, and then finally how I sharpen both for web and for print. So starting in the Lightroom module, hitting Tab will turn off and on the modules that are on the left and the right. We're only going to be working with the modules on the right, which is in the Develop module, and it's designed to basically work from the top to the bottom. Now, by checking the boxes here and here to make them have a white border, that will show you if you have any darks that are too dark or any whites that are blown out. I always leave those on. Next, I'm going to level the shot by hitting the square and then sliding down to the lens corrections. Since I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and hit Enable Profile, Remove Chromatic, make sure that that's checked, come back to Basic, and hit Level. Now, as long as there is a good vertical in the photo or a good horizontal, it does a really good job of leveling it. And in this case, it looks to me like it did a great job. So from here, I'm going to crop the image in just a touch on the front and just a touch on the back. I like to leave a little bit more than most because I'll explain later, but there's a particular filter that I use that I think looks better when there's a little bit more of a border between the nose and the tail. So this looks good to me. I'll accept. Moving back to the top, the next thing I'll do is on a shot that I've taken in the evening, I oftentimes will make the white balance shade. I will pull my highlights down just a touch. I'll pull the whites down just a touch. Take the shadows and open them just a hair. Vibrance I'm going to leave alone. I'm going to leave the curves alone. I'm going to leave the saturation alone. And then sharpening. With sharpening, I always take the radius to 0.5. I'm shooting with a Nikon D810. If you've got a higher resolution camera, I've found that about 50 works good here. 50, 0.5, 25, and masking. Masking just basically says where do we want the pre-sharpening to be. Anything that is white is sharpened, anything that is black is not. We don't want to sharpen the sky. We would rather sharpen the airplane edges and perhaps some of the foreground. So I'll go ahead with that. Luminance, I usually add about 15. I'll bump up my color. Noise correction. We've already checked these two boxes. The last thing I'm going to do is check for dust spots. So hit this tool, visualize spots. Will show you any obnoxious offenders. There could still be some minor spots that we can check for later, but that looks pretty good for now. So now we're going to send this into Photoshop, and we're going to apply several Nik programs, one of them being Nik Define to take care of noise, one of them being Viveza to add a global contrast, and then Color Effects Pro to add our creative touch. Alright, now that we've got the image open in Photoshop, I'm going to go to the Filter, Nik Collection, Define 2.0, and here's the way Define works. The algorithm that it's got built in does a really good job finding noise. If it were to be missing something, let's say you had a shot that really had a lot of noise, you took it in a high ISO and it's just not quite getting everything you want it to get. Hypothetically, let's say there's some noise down in the shadows. You can tell where the software has sampled the various tones in the image by these white squares. So it's sampled it here, here, there, and there. If you wanted to add another sampling area, all you have to do is go to normally this is in automatic when it opens up. You go to manual, you can click this little dialog box and that will allow you to put another spot. And then you hit measure noise and it'll measure the noise. I am only going to use automatic for this one because I like where it has sampled the image, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that. That will save that effect into another layer. Once that's saved, we're going to go ahead and move into the next Nik program, which is Viveza. I use Avesa for my aviation photography typically to add a little bit of warmth, contrast, and detail. So what we're going to do globally is we're going to add just a touch of contrast. We're going to add about 25 on the structure, and we're going to add a little bit of warmth to the whole image and hit OK. Now we didn't get crazy with Avesa, that's why I allowed it to make those enhancements in a global way, not specifically where I wanted them. I just wanted the whole image to have a little bit more structure, a little bit more contrast. From here we're going to go into Color Effects Pro, and this is where you can add your creative signature to the image. Color Effects Pro, if you haven't seen any of my other videos or watched anybody else's video, this is a pretty cool program. It's really, I think, worth buying. It's worth the price that Google is charging for the entire software suite, which is in the neighborhood of 150 bucks. In my mind, this one plugin is worth 150 bucks or more. It's just fantastic what you can do to your images. And it doesn't matter if it's aviation, portraits, wedding, whatever you're shooting, you can come up with some really cool edits using Color Effects Pro. When it opens, it'll always open in the last filter that you were using. In my case, it was Pro Contrast. And this is how this thing is laid out. Basically, these are all the filters that you can add. You can stack them one upon the other. Or you can come down here and save recipes, which I have some saved. And simply, let's hypothetically say you liked this one. Click it, it puts everything you had on there, and you're ready to go. Now, what I will tell you is, you typically, especially when you have an airplane and a sky in the background, you cannot just add arbitrary filters and expect that the final product is going to be what you want. You've got to clean these up. So what Nik has done is they've come up with this control point technology where you put the point where you want the effect. And here's how that works. I'm just going to take you through a basic edit. We're going to add some contrast, some brilliance, some warmth, and a couple other filters I like, and you can see how this works. So we'll start off with Pro Contrast. Pro Contrast is an awesome filter. What do these three sliders mean? Well, correct contrast is global contrast for the whole shot. You can see the difference when you bump it up. Okay. Dynamic contrast is more mid-tone contrast. So you can see when you slide this over, it also has a nice effect. So we'll go with this right here, but keep in mind, we don't really want contrast in the bland sky. That's how you're going to develop shadows around the edge of the plane. So you can tell the software where not to put the contrast by hitting the minus button, dropping this here, okay? And then open up your control point tab and click this button right here. Okay guys, so what this is showing us is whatever is black is concealed from the effect, whatever is white is revealed to the effect, and whatever is gray has a little bit of the effect. So what these control points are looking for is similar tones. Now, this is what's so important to understand is how we apply the contrast to right where we want it. And this is what really sets this software apart from anybody else. So remember, we put a negative control point in the sky. We don't want it there. We do want it in the grass. So grab the plus control point and put it here. Now you can see it's totally white. That means it's getting the effect. Let's put a control point on the plane because we want it on the plane, don't we? Okay. Let's put another positive control point here on the plane. Okay, and that looks good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this negative control point and make sure that we tell the software we don't want the sky to have that contrast. How do we do that? Very simply, hold Option down, grab that control point, and just drag it up a little bit. Grab this one, holding Option on a Mac, drag it over here. Now, when we click this button, we can see that our contrast is only on the airplane. That's before and that's after. Looks much better, okay? Moving on. The next filter that I like to add, I like Bleach Bypass, okay? Bleach Bypass first opens up in a very desaturated state. So I'll slide the saturation back, I'll slide this contrast back, and for the most part, I manipulate this local contrast. Okay, and I like to bump that up a little bit. Again, we can put the negative control point in the sky, telling it don't add it up there. Do the exact same steps. Click this button, shows you dark is where it is not, white is where it is. So we're going to put this down here, and we're going to put another positive control point on the plane, like this. And then we're going to hold Option down and drag this here, and here, and here, and here. Okay? And I'm actually going to put one more control point on the plane, because it looks like it got a little confused there. So let's have a look at what that looks like. We can turn it off, turn it on. It's subtle, but I like it. Okay, moving on. Adding another filter. We're stacking these on top, making our own recipe. Brilliance and warmth. Okay, it's a great filter. I usually will increase my perceptual saturation just a hair, maybe to 10%. I like to add about 10, 15%, maybe 20% of warmth. Leave saturation alone, unless I want to put it in there. Next one. Anytime I've got grass, I like to put the foliage filter on. So at this point, you have 3 different start points, sort of like that one. And again, let's hit the control point, tell it that we want the grass, sure, but we don't want the airplane. Let's make sure we're not getting the airplane. And it looks like we were. So I'm going to go ahead and put a negative control point there, and we'll put a negative control point on the tail, because it must have been selecting similar tones. And that looks good. And we'll leave that like that. All right. Moving on. How about a little bit of, I don't know, how about dark and light in center? That's always a good one. I like to pick the wider, more elliptical shape. I like to bring that size of that shape up a little bit. And you can see before, after. Sort of draws the attention into the airplane. And we could take a look at adding a little detail extractor just in a very, very light manner. See what that looks like. We'll slide the effect intensity maybe 20%. I like fine. And again, we do not want this in the sky. So let's put a negative control point in the sky. And let's have a look at our control point dialog box here and see where it's being applied. Positive control point right here. We want it certainly in the grass. Positive control point there. We want it on the airplane. And then holding Option down, we're going to go ahead and slide this up here and here. And then come back. Okay, so we can call this good right now. Let's save this as a recipe so we can come back to it. And we can call it whatever we want. We'll call it tutorial. I know how to spell. Tutorial for Nick. Hit OK. And then sliding down, it'll be, if we want to make that a favorite, we slide down to the actual one that we just made. There, it'll be bordered with a yellow border. And click the star, and now it's one of your favorites. Hit OK, and we're going to be saving back to Photoshop. And I'm going to show you how I sharpen. Alright guys, we're going to get to sharpening the image now, but I wanted to show you the power of that software. This was the image before as we took it out of Lightroom into Photoshop, and this is the image after. You can see it's just fantastic what that software can do when it's deployed properly. So moving on, we're going to sharpen. Now how do I sharpen? This sounds more complicated than it is, but I've created workflows to streamline the process. I'm going to do this without the workflow, so you can see exactly what I'm doing. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten the image. All right. Then I'm going to duplicate the image. The reason I duplicate is the duplicated version I'm going to reduce the size to the size I'm going to send onto the web. The other one's going to stay full size in case I want to print this image. All right. So we flatten the image. Let's duplicate the image, and when we duplicate it, let's name this one Web, and let's work on it. First thing with the web version is I reduce the size of the image, and let's go down to 1620 pixels across. Always use smooth gradients. That's what I like. It seems to work better for handling banding in the sky. So hit OK, and then zoom back into about 66 to 100%. We'll go to 100, and I'm working on a Mac. I'm going to hit Command J, duplicate the layer. Then we're going to go ahead with Filter, Other, High Pass. First pass is going to be at 0.3 pixels. Then we're going to change our blend mode to hard light. And then we're going to create a layer mask so that we can mask that effect to the areas we want it. Hit the layer mask button and hit Command I. That inverted the mask so that right now none of that filter is applied. We're going to paint it where we want it. We paint it by selecting B on our keyboard, and that'll pull up our brush tool. Whenever I sharpen, I always select this second brush, the hard-edged brush, and I always set my initial opacity and flow to 100 each, making sure that white is the foreground color. That way we're going to reveal what's behind this black mask. So all you have to do is you don't have to be really exact. It doesn't matter if a little of it bleeds over, it's not going to be noticeable. So I just make my diameter big enough to knock this out in a quick fashion. We'll sharpen a little bit of the foreground, and that's good. Okay? Now, simply tab over here to your full size one. We're going to do the same exact thing. All right? Command J, that duplicated our layer. Now, if we go Filter and just select the high pass, it's going to put exactly the same level. It's going to be 0.4 pixels or 0.3 pixels, and we are then left with only having to change the blend mode to hard light and creating our layer mask here. Command I to invert the mask, increase your diameter, zoom in a little bit, and let's paint this sharpening onto the plane. The nice thing about this is it does not generate edge halos, it does not generate jagged edges. It really does a good job for sharpening. And you'll see the final product here. So I'll put a little bit down here, that's fine. We don't have to be specific. Now, flatten this layer. Okay. Duplicate by Command J. Back into Filter. This time don't select high pass right away. We're going to change the radius this time. So go Other, High Pass, and let's take the radius to 0.4. 0.4 or 0.5. Just depends on really your final results here. Sometimes I can get away with 0.5 without creating any jagged edges. Sometimes I got to stick with 0.4, but let's try 0.5, see what it looks like. Okay? Next, we're going to change this blend mode to soft light. Again, a layer mask, and again, inverting that mask. Now we're going to zoom in, and we're going to sharpen. This is our full size one. And you can see it's doing a really nice job. No jagged edges. You know this is a good process if we're not getting jagged edges on that red engine fan blade stripe. I mean, if it's subtle, but it's effective, and that's what I like about it. I don't mind taking the time to run a couple, actions and taking the time to paint it in. I like to be more specific with this because I want the final product to look good. Remember, don't aspire to be a spotter with a camera. Try to be a photographer that spots. So take time in your edits. The final product will be worth it. Now, once I've done that, I'm flattening the image and I'm saving it. This was my full-size version. Once it's saved, I'm just going to close it. Okay? And we're left with the web-sized one. And if you remember where we left off with the first layer mask. We've sharpened our first pass. So now, flatten this image, Command J, and we're going to go to Filter. And yes, we can just select high pass because it's going to just apply the last high pass that we wanted, which was 0.5. Next, we're going to change this to soft light. and then we're going to create a layer mask and invert the mask. Now we're going to zoom in. We're already at 100%. Change my diameter of my brush, and then we're just going to paint along the airplane. Now I will tell you that sometimes, 0.3, 0.4 works pretty good. I'm probably pushing it at 0.5 on this one. I'm just making sure I didn't get any jagged edges along that American Airlines lettering. It looks like maybe a little. So here's what you can do. Select X on your keyboard, grabbing the black brush. This will paint out what we painted in. But I don't want to paint it all out. I'm just going to paint 30% of it out. So I'll leave the opacity at 70, and I'll just go over those letters, and that should be just fine. I'm happy with that. Layer, flatten image, and now save for web. I have JPEG maximum 100 on the quality, optimize, convert it to sRGB because we're sending it to the web, and hit save. Name it what you want to name it, send it where you want to send it, hit OK, and you're done. That's it. Close this. And that is how we edit an image using Lightroom and the Nik Software suite. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions, put them at the bottom of the video. I read them and I'll get back with you. Have a great day, everybody.